Welcome to Today's Homeowner with Danny Lipford. Expert advice on improving your home from the pages of Today's Homeowner magazine and professional remodeler Danny Lipford.
Well, this project's moving along real well, and I hope you've been able to follow it over the last few weeks. Apparently, a lot of you have, because we've received a lot of letters and email, not only about this job, but about general home improvement issues, particularly paint and decorating. Well, this week we'll visit a decorating center and talk with a paint expert about all the different types of paints that are available and how to choose the right one for your job. And we'll talk with a decorator about how you can really make a room come to life by using wallpaper and wallpaper borders. And of course, we'll check in on this job and get you up to date. Stay with us. Boy, we're using a lot of the beaded board on porch ceilings these days. You know, 100 years ago, almost every porch ceiling had beaded board. Now that's the way it is with a lot of remodeling trends. They just seem to resurface from time to time. Now the owners of this house decided to undertake this remodeling project to update the house and to make it more livable instead of buying a new house. Now before we started, we had to remove a lot of large trees to make room for the foundation, and we had to remove an obsolete flat patio cover that was causing a lot of problems because of leaks, and it would be in the way of one of the additions. One of the things the homeowners wanted to accomplish is a larger master suite. We were able to accomplish that by building the addition on the rear of the house for the master bedroom, and then we converted the existing master bedroom into a real nice master bath. Now over the last few weeks we've been able to show you the foundation work, the framing, all of the roof work, and how we actually created a recessed ceiling, very spacious ceiling in the master bedroom. Another thing the homeowners wanted is a larger den area, or to convert the den into a great room, and to update the kitchen, to remodel it, and to create a nice breakfast room. We were able to do all of that by adding this large addition on. Real nice great room, again, with the recessed ceiling, and I think you'll agree, this porch cover looks much better than the one on the original house. Now, in addition to adding this living space, we also updated a lot of the systems, electrical and heating and cooling, and we really upgraded a lot of the doors that were inside the original house that were a smooth hollow core door, and we upgraded those to a nice panel wood door. Now last week we looked at all the trim work that was taking place and all of the closet work, and that's almost finished. Now this is one of the last rooms in the house to have the trim installed for a couple different reasons. You can see they're using this as one of their saw areas with the table saw here in the center of the room, and some of the other saws are used and the sanders are on the outside. Another reason they saved this room for last is it's going to take a little more work to trim out some of these areas, including this cased opening that we're about to deal with. Now when you have an opening like this in a room, you can case it with wood like we're doing, commonly called a cased opening, where you're putting wood here and trim on either side, or many times you'll find openings like this that have drywall returns. Now what you do there is you put a piece of drywall here, and then the drywall finisher will finish all of that, making a nice sleek look to it. But a better look really is to apply the wood like we're doing. Now the problem here is that because we installed several layers of drywall over existing plaster, it made this much larger or much wider than a normal opening. Normally you would have the stud and a piece of drywall on either side making a 4 9/16 opening. Here it's much wider than that. Now in order for us to take care of that, we'll be using some good clear 1x8, and we'll be marking this, and then using the table saw, our trim man will rip this down to a good uniform width that will take care of this opening. And after he's finished all of the table saw work, then he has a self-feeding drum sander set up on the outside to run the boards through to get a good smooth finish on the face of the wood. Now it's real important in this room that we get a good smooth face, because all of this woodwork is being stained instead of painted, and so before any of the stains applied, we really need a good smooth surface on that. Now after he's gotten all of his pieces sanded and cut, then he assembles the partial portion of the cased opening, and once he gets the one side of the opening together, he's able to take it into the cased opening and install it, using a level to get it good and plumb, good and level. After he's done that, of course, he'll run his trim on the back side, and it's ready for the painter to come in and start his stain work. Now, the rest of the trim in this room is very standard, just like the rest of the house, with the crown molding and the base molding, but you really have to start with your openings since your base molding tie into this. So stay with us. Next, our simple solution for the week.
Get ready to review your fix-it list as Danny and home repair pro Alan Lyle show you this week's simple solution.
Even the most well-built brick home occasionally can get a settlement crack like we have here.
Now, we're fortunate here in that the settlement crack is following the mortar line itself, plus the homeowner saved a bag of the original mortar used in construction. Now, if you don't have that luxury, you can pick up several different colors at your local hardware store.
Now, in order to really point this crack up with mortar, first of all, Alan's going to start with a cold chisel to groove it out a little bit there to create a little more space for the mortar to go in. While he's doing that, I can show you how this little bag we're going to use here, it's called a grout bag. That's very similar to a pastry bag that you would use in maybe putting some icing on the top of a cake. This makes it a lot easier to force the mortar into the crack. Now, I'll hold the bottom of it here if you want to try to, this is the tricky part here in trying to feed it all into the grout bag itself.
All right, here we go.
All right, that should do a number of cracks.
I think that's plenty.
Okay.
Let me fold that up. Okay.
Now, the reason for the grout bag, of course, is to force the mortar into the crack as much as possible. And of course, after you apply a good bit of this into the joint, then you can come back with just a regular paint stirrer like this and force it into the crack even more. Of course, it's still a fairly messy job.
All right, the fortunate thing about it though, Danny, is if you feel like you haven't got enough in there, you can always come back and make a second pass.
Now, after you finish on this, of course, you can scrape off any of the excess that you have. And then after it dries a little bit, you're able to take a wet rag and wipe all of this down a little bit. Makes a big difference in the overall appearance. Now, naturally, you'll have a situation where some discoloration will take place. A little bit of weathering will take care of that. Now, the trim that's being used here in the kitchen and breakfast area will be the same that we use in the great room, and it will be stained as well. You can see the trim carpenters laid out a few of the pieces here because the painter will be here shortly to apply the first coat of stain. Now, the stain that's being used on this will match the same color that we're using on the cabinetry. You can see that the cabinet man's made us a little piece here to show that. You can see how well the stain will match once this gets the first coat of varnish on it. Now, what we'll do here is apply the first coat of stain, allow it to dry, then one coat of sealer, and after it dries, it'll be installed. Then the painter will come back and putty over any of the nail heads and put the last coat of varnish on it. This will really look good in these rooms because of all of the cabinetry and the trim matching with the same stain. Now, this was easy to pick this out. The homeowner didn't really have a hard time on that because she knew just what she wanted on it. But on paint colors, it's a lot different because there's so much to choose from in different colors that are out there as well as different types of paint. A lot of times we get questions about the type of paint to use on a particular project. Earlier this week, we visited a Decorator center and talked with a paint expert that'll answer a lot of those questions for you. One thing about making your selections at a Decorator center is all the elements that you need to make those decisions are all under one roof. You have carpet samples, hardwood flooring samples, wallpaper, but all the decisions start with selection of your paint. You know, there's a lot of factors to consider when you're selecting paint. It helps when you know a little bit more about it. Here to help us with that is Robert Moore, who's been in the paint business for a number of years. Robert, things have changed over the years as far as paint and the type of paints that are available. Give us a little history lesson on that.
The older paints 10 to 15 years ago had, and longer of course, original, had a lot of lead and mercury, which really stood out and would last on homes 15 years. You didn't have to worry about it. Well, you can't find it anymore. You still find it in industrial paints, but it takes a special license to purchase it and not really used in homes.
Sure.
Now, of course, today we have oils and latexes. Latex is becoming a little more prevalent than oils. Both are still good products. They just don't last as long, perhaps, as the old lead and mercury filled paints.
I see. Well, now working behind the counter like this in a paint store, I'm sure you get a lot of the same questions over and over. What are some of those common questions you hear from homeowners?
I suppose one of the most prevalent questions we get is sheen. You have so many different sheens and so many lines of paint, beginning with flats, eggshell, satin gloss, semi-gloss, high gloss. Depends on the project. If you're restoring an old home, for example, doing woodwork, I would always go with at least minimum satin gloss. You could go with a semi-gloss, but keep in mind, the higher the sheen, the more it'll show imperfection.
Right.
So we sell an awful lot of satin gloss or even low luster for that type of thing. New wood always has to be primed. Walls, when I say primed, there are a number of applications here, but new wood, always put an oil-based primer on it.
Right.
You can put a latex, but I'm of the old school, oil is the best.
Sure.
As far as the walls are concerned, particularly in deep colors, using blues, greens, particularly burgundies and reds, those kind of colors will burnish if it's flat. So the best thing here, Danny, I always recommend to the customer, use an eggshell. You can use a semi-gloss, but it's got an awful lot of depth and it's shiny. Again, it'll show imperfection, like old nail holes that have been patched over.
Sure, sure.
The eggshell is highly washable, just like your semi-glosses are, and they are enamels, even though they're latexes.
I see. Now, when you talk about dark colors, anytime you say that to a painter and suggest one of the dark colors, you always see those dollar signs in his eye. Now, why is that?
The reason for it is you're talking about labor intensity, you're talking about more time that the painter has to spend, because reds, those deep colors, will take at least 2 coat applications, sometimes 3.
I see.
Depending on uniformity of color.
Sure.
That's what he's after.
Now, another thing that you can buy a gallon of paint for $25. You can buy the same type of paint for $10. What's the big difference in that?
Well, both will cover. However, if it was my home, I would want something that would be long-lasting.
Sure.
Not to take away from the cheaper paints, but they're less expensive for a reason. They don't have as much in them.
I see.
So any manufacturer that puts out a top line, you're safe using that top line paint, and it will last longer.
Okay. Another quick question. Oil over latex, latex over oil. I'm sure you get that one a lot.
Always a question that's asked. The old school, the professional way that even I was taught many years ago is, if you're going to put latex over oil, don't do it unless you sand that surface to where you knock off all sheen. There's no peeling. Make it good and smooth. Put an oil-based primer. It sounds a little weird, but it'll dry flat, and that's the key. You can put a latex over that.
Okay, great. I know you get asked that question a good bit, and thanks for this information. We'll have to get back with
Yes,
you
sir.
another time, 'cause there's a lot more to learn. And stay with us. After this Best New Product segment, we'll talk wallpaper.
It's time to check out the Home Center for this week's Best New Product with Danny and today's Homeowner Magazine's Editor-in-Chief, Paul Spring.
You know, Danny, when I was remodeling, I used to get the occasional irate phone call from somebody who had been in the shower and the temperature suddenly changed on the water.
That's why we started recommending the pressure balance valves in those shower and tub areas.
I wish I'd had those. What a pressure balance valve does is literally equalize the pressure so you always have the same temperature in the shower. Now, imagine that somebody flushes the toilet. What that does is lower the pressure on the cold water side. Now, if you don't have a pressure balance valve, what happens is more hot water rushes in to take its place, and you end up in a very hot shower. What a pressure balance valve does is just, in that situation, lower the hot water pressure as well, and you keep the temperature within about 3 degrees of where you set it, comfortable and safe. Now, normally pressure balance valves come in a single control unit, but Delta has given us a new twist on this. This is their Monitor 2 valve, and it comes in the traditional look of 2 handles. The way it works is the plumbing connections are here, and that's hot and cold. Allows you to control the temperature over here on the right side. On the left side is the volume control, Danny.
Now, if you're installing this in a bathroom remodeling project, you'll have to remove the walls around the shower tub area, or you can access the back part of this through a shower wall. Now, this is available in the brass finish as well as almond and chrome. Yeah, that thing will look great. You know, one of the areas in a decorating center that can be the most overwhelming is the wallpaper section. Now, here to talk to us about it is Allison Hodges. Now, Allison, when people are coming in and wanting to pick out a lot of wallpaper, what are some of the first questions you have to ask them?
Well, one of the first questions we ask is where they plan on putting the wallpaper. This can be important if they plan on putting it in a kitchen or a bath area. The reason being is that in a bath area, you're going to have more moisture, more humidity from the shower or bath, and in a kitchen area, you might have some spills or splashes from the sink or the cooktop. Vinyl paper is a good thing to consider in these areas because a solid vinyl paper is going to be very scrubbable, very cleanable. You can really get your sponge out and clean that up.
You know, we've used a lot of the solid vinyl paper in those areas, and it's amazing how durable it really is. You can really clean up very well with that. Now, a lot of times homeowners have trouble figuring out quantities of paper. What's your ideas on that?
Well, if they have measured before and they've been accurate, they've installed the paper, or had somebody install by their measurements, and they feel comfortable with it, I suggest they go ahead and tackle that job themselves. If they don't feel particularly comfortable with it, they might want to contact a professional installer, have them come out, take a look at the room, and they can make recommendations on the quantity that they need to order.
Okay, now it's a big advantage probably to go ahead and make the selection of the particular type of paper, because I know your pattern or repeat can be different on almost every paper.
That's true. Larger patterns, florals for instance, are going to cause more waste when the paper is being installed. The installer will need to know that when they're making their estimations. And then a stripe or a smaller pattern is not going to need nearly as much paper, so you might be able to save some there.
But make sure you get enough paper, because if it comes up short, it can be a problem. I know you've probably seen that before.
Many times, unfortunately, if you run short on a job, you might run into a die lot variation. All wallpapers do come in run numbers or die lots. And if you happen to run short, that same die lot might not be available. So it's best to have a little bit extra. Also, this can come in handy when, in a few years down the road, if you have an accident or a spill that's not cleanable, you have some to replace that with.
I know we've ran into that a good bit, where maybe doing a little remodeling project, moving a door over, something like that, to where how valuable that extra paper can be where someone has really held on to it.
Exactly.
Another question I wanted to ask you is the popularity of wallpaper borders. I'm seeing more and more borders, and it's almost endless the type that you can choose now, isn't it?
That's true. One of the aspects about borders is that it's an inexpensive decorating tool. It comes in spools, and you can pick them up for not a lot of an investment, and it's a do-it-yourself project sometimes too.
Good. Okay. Great information. I appreciate that. And next, our Around the Yard.
Now for a bit of news from the great outdoors as Danny takes a look around the yard.
If you have partial packs of vegetable or flower seeds left over from years past, they may still be good. So before buying new seeds, test the old ones for viability. One method is to place 10 seeds from the package you want to test between layers of moist paper towels. Then seal the paper towels in a plastic bag and put it in a warm place. Now, once a few of the seeds have germinated, wait a few days. If 8 or more have sprouted, the seeds are fine and you can plant them as you normally would. If 5 to 8 have sprouted, sow the seeds a little extra heavy. Less than 5, well, it's probably time to buy some fresh seeds. By the way, seeds keep longer if they're stored under cool, dry conditions. Now, room temperature is fine for most types of seeds, but refrigerated storage is even better. Now, the plastic film canisters make excellent storage containers for seeds, but remember to label them so that you know what you have in the canister from year to year. Well, I'm looking at some of the paint colors that the homeowners have narrowed down for the walls here in the master bedroom. Now, they've already decided to go with a straight semi-gloss white on all of the trim, which is always a good contrast between the trim and the wall color. Now, over the next few weeks, the painters will be just swarming this job, and we're going to give them an opportunity to complete most of their work. Then we'll come back to this job to show you the completed project. In the meantime, we'll take a look at an existing house that has a large storage building that we're converting to a living area or a mother-in-law suite. This is something we're seeing a lot of these days. I hope you'll be with us next week here on Today's Homeowner.